I think he's going to time down a bit here, but I'll let the suspense build if you haven't guessed what he does already. He was definitely a pretty tough player, despite him making, I think, a fairly substantial mistake pre-flop by folding too much. He definitely, I thought he played really well otherwise, and he definitely ran well versus me, but I thought he played really well. So anyways, he double pots the river, which is just such a sick bet. I really, looking back, I wasn't really thinking about this at the time, but this is just a ridiculously sick bet by him. It's such a good bet because of the fact that I just have so few nut hands, and he has so many on this flop relative to me. He can just make these huge bets, and this is kind of a game theory concept. He can just make these huge bets in these type of spots and just own me because I divided up my range earlier. And even though in usually it is a wrong usually if I'd gotten this spot usually but where I'm pretty much getting owned, it would have been indicative that I made a mistake earlier in the hand in choosing my strategy. But like I said, it's just a function of me having that pre-flop edge and not being able to do anything about it apart from changing his strategy pre-flop. So that said, let's get on to this river. Basically, I'll break the suspense down. I end up calling on the river, and I think that's a pretty bad mistake. I think I made a pretty large mistake by calling this river. But first, I'll just give kind of my thought process at the time. Basically, my thought process was, wow, this is a sick bet. And then I thought, what better hands am I getting to this river with? And I was thinking, Queen Deuce is probably one hand I would get here. Queen 4, same thing. And then that's just about it. I'd definitely raise pocket 2s on the turn. Even though it looks ridiculously strong, I think you just have to raise. Although I guess I could be convinced that you could call and try to induce and then shove the river to make it look like a draw or something, but you probably just need to raise pocket 2s on the turn. So I'm pretty near the top of my range, and I kept thinking to myself, well, he's risking 2x the pot, so that means from a game theory perspective, I need to be calling about a third of the time to make him, indifferent to just shitting on me with his bluffs. But in retrospect, and if I had been thinking clearly at the time, I would have realized that it just doesn't matter. I should pretty much just fold. I probably shouldn't fold Queen Deuce or Queen 4 because he can probably be doing this with a few worse hands. And when we actually see his hand, he can certainly be doing it with worse hands. But for value, I mean. But I think with this hand, where it's just a pure bluff catcher, where I beat absolutely zero of his value betting range, I need to fold every time, and I just need to realize that I can be making these really ridiculously tight folds. I wouldn't call it a ridiculously tight fold winning 2x pots from an exploitive standpoint, but from a game theory standpoint, I'm making these ridiculously tight folds because I have that edge pre-flop. So anyways, he pretty much does the super own here with a hand that I didn't think he would in a million years 2x pot, and he shows up with Queen 10, I believe, which is just a really, really great bet by him. I think it's a even better bet because I'm a station, but it's still a pretty good bet with no information about my game because I just rarely have a better hand, and it's a spot where most of my range is bluff catchers, so he can't really go wrong with 2x potting there, even with a hand as weak as Queen 10. It's just a situation where if I'm ever really calling with worse hands, that he makes a pretty large profit. So yeah, good hand by him. I felt owned after that hand. And I just want to pause here for the Jack's hand. A couple things. I know in my last video I was talking a lot about, on my last two videos about on these ace high and king high type dry flops, having like a checking and betting range and stuff. And I still think that's definitely viable, and I definitely do that myself. But for this particular match at this time, I had folded a few ace-x off hands to that I could have potentially re-raised with. And the reason was just that at that point in the match, I had already been 3-betting a ton, and I just needed to calm it down for a few hands. So it just wasn't a good spot. So partly because of that, partly because I don't really have those hands in my range this match, and partly it's just kind of a thing that I kind of go back and forth on, that I'm not really convinced totally one way or the other as far as betting my whole range on these flops, or dividing up my range by checking some and betting some and checking some error, etc. It's kind of a close spot, and I wouldn't really fault anyone that did either way. I kind of go back and forth, so at this time I was just kind of betting my whole range, and yeah, I wouldn't make a big deal about excuse me, a big deal about that. The king 5 with the heart draw, it's fine to bet out, obviously. You know, we're getting it in, we have a huge hand. It's also fine to go for like a check raise or something. I don't think it's a great spot to go for a check raise, just because it's kind of a weird hand to check raise. Because most of the hands that we're folding out by check raising are hands that we beat anyways. Like, he's not really gonna bet fold like pocket 7s on that board. So I think it's better just to bet that hand. If we wanted to introduce like a checking range and go for check shoves and stuff, probably be better just to check shove some flush draws or something like that didn't have a pair. You don't even have to really think about that. It's just kind of a just wanted to point that out, I guess. Not that big a deal. The ace 9, ace high, I think it's okay to check raise this flop with ace 9. I don't think it's bad or anything. I decided, since he bet, I think that was actually my original plan, was to check raise, and then he bet only $12, so I decided just to check call. And on this river, I actually think it's a fairly good spot to just bet out as a bluff, for a couple of reasons. First, I think you fold out some better hands, obviously, like 2s through 4s, 5x, and maybe 6x, but probably calls with 6x a decent amount. And it's pretty much one of the worst hands I get to this river with. You know, I definitely do check call some flush draws on this flop, and so I don't really have any missed draws, really. And I'd probably value bet 8x or better. And I don't really have any kings in my range either. When he bets half pot, I'd probably check raise all my kings, because I don't think he really is betting a strong hand like that pretty much ever. So I do kind of have a not narrower value range, but I think it's okay to bluff here. It's not terrible. That said, I wouldn't actually get him off the hand he had, so it's not a big deal for this particular hand. But in general, I don't think a river bet is that bad. The 4-7 suited, like I said earlier in the video, that's I think I had 7-3 suited earlier in the video, but that's a hand I would definitely be re-raising most of the time. It just happened to be, again, a period in the match where I'd already re-raised a ton, and I was looking to calm down my image a little bit, so I still have some fold equity on my 3 bets, because you only get so many good hands to 3 bet for value. So I'll probably fold this ace 4 off as well for the same reason. I do still think it's good to 3 bet those hands in a lot of situations when you think you have some decent fold equity. Kind of a lull in the match, I suppose. Here, we're both, or at least I am, trying to calm my image down a little bit, so we're playing a little bit tighter.